Okay, let's see. We got everything going now. Can you hear me okay?
Let me see on YouTube if it's working right.
Yeah, I pulled it up. I was afraid. Yeah, I just heard it. I've got my ear thing buds in,
Yeah.
and actually got it on my laptop sitting here beside me to make sure. I've been here since 7 o'clock. I've been trying to
Oh,
test
goodness.
everything. So what's really cool is I now what happened there was it. I gotta pull one of those out because I'm hearing myself on YouTube, but
Okay.
I wanted to check it as well. But I can at least pick it up and grab it, listen to it if I have to. No, what I finally got was a connection with YouTube's audio. I mean, Zoom's audio. So that's what I wanted to see.
Zoom's audio or Zoom's chat?
No, Zoom's audio. So now, see, before nobody could hear you that we're streaming to, and so
Right.
now that's what kind of happened. So it's kind of cool because now at least they can't see you, but they can hear you. So that is exciting to me because when I would listen to the YouTube video later on, all of a sudden I would hear this. I could hear you, but it was very shallow. I don't know if you went back and ever looked at it. And I'm trying to, and I'm also testing the chat, and I'm glad I did this because what I did was I have so many things, but it's okay. It's kind of cool because it's all actually working. Hi,
Yeah.
the Hayneses are there. Marianne, thank you guys for joining. And so I'm kind of doing my own moderation. Okay, let me try to work on that, Rhett. So can you hear me now like that? Okay, well I got to bump up your audio. Hold on. Okay, can you hear me now down there? All right, thank you for letting me know. So I got audio everywhere. It's like, you got audio from Zoom coming into here to YouTube to Facebook and then in the auditorium and
You're reaching the world.
that's what it takes. That's fine. I'm happy with it. So, um, yeah, I mean, there's a social media side to the VMix that, as we're having our discussions and stuff, that it should bring it up um, right in the middle. I can kind of show you what it's supposed to look like, but I don't see that it's engaging. This is so as you come up like this, and then it would just fade out. So I have it set up so as people would be sending comments, we would see this come up like that, and it would I had one of them working, but so give me a second. There's a way that I can look at something that.
Oh, don't worry about it. Maybe next time.
Well, this is my testing. This is the only time I get to test. I mean, that's the reason I need to do this. It won't take that long. I'm just gonna try to get it to fire up. That's all. And then this way it should run on its own. But okay. Oh well. Yeah, if it comes on, it'll automatically. So if all of a sudden you see it, it'll be neat. Um, but I know that we already have 2 that were on YouTube that have responded. You know, the Hayneses you did, so we should have seen it. So then the only way I get to try to fix it and see if it's going to work is by having it live. So it takes a little bit of a time as well. So yeah, this is all on the vMix, and I'm very impressed with it. It's been, you know, I mean, it's been a lot of work in bringing it on, but it is far more productive and stable, and it's going to give us the ability to do a lot more things with it as well. So it's just a matter of getting it all transferred over. And we still have the original configuration and everything with OBS, so if we have to, and not only that, but actually I'm probably going to need to continue to use the OBS on one of the computers. So it's kind of interesting. So it's exciting, but I'm going to simplify also the intro. There's no music on it, so I'm trying to tweak on that as well. I'm going to probably just put something up there instead of having the video. It saves on streaming and everything else. And yeah, see, the YouTube is freezing. I think I just saw it freeze up. Oh, maybe not.
I have YouTube open on my phone, and it looks like it's just delayed a little bit,
Okay.
but not frozen.
I paused it on my laptop over here, so I freaked out when I looked down over there and saw it kind of frozen. But I think that's the only problem I'm really having right now is getting the numbers and all the different data set up to stream. I didn't have that much of a problem with the OBS. It was much simpler, but this is a bigger system. So I'm going to probably reach out to Jason, somebody who has volunteered to help me out, and talk to him about that. That's the only thing that I can think of right now. But the integration with the audio and vMix is really exciting because I really wanted other people to hear us discuss it. You know, last week we did it on vMix as well. I didn't have many things in place like I do today. And I thought we lost the YouTube and everything. And I went back yesterday and I was actually looking and it's there. So I was really excited about that we didn't, because that was such a fantastic discussion we had last week. So I'm glad we didn't lose it. So I did a little editing and, you know, I guess polished it up a little bit. Not any of our conversation, but just so maybe other people will be able to find it a little easier. So yeah, if you're out there, I can see really well on the chat, so I really hope that you will. If you hear something, you say, you know, something you want to add, please jump in. And I really have it set nicely to where I'll be able to see it as we're going through the class this morning. If we have any problems, just also text it, or send it on the chat, or you guys let me know. So last week we were supposed to actually talk about this this section here, and we never. Oh, I gotta reset my stuff here. There we go. Yeah, last week we were supposed to really get into the escape of Peter and then Herod, but never really got there because we had some unfinished business from the week before that I felt that we needed to talk about. And so that really started a conversation that went really in depth, and I was very appreciative of everyone who was involved in it too, because it is an important topic. That's one of the reasons we're doing this class and this study. I'm not going to say class because I hope you don't think that I'm just the only one. We're all contributing, I hope, in this effort. And so I don't want to be like the only person to feel like I'm the only person here that has all the knowledge of this. And I know Lacey and Becky, you guys have brought up some really great points, and sometimes I miss them. So that's what I want us to do, is have this engaging. And same with everybody out there that's joining us on live stream. I hope that you as well will provide your input. I'm not sure if Facebook, if you're joined us on Facebook, I'm not sure about the connection on the chat from Facebook. It's supposed to, but I don't know. I'm getting better, but I'm trying to also get these scheduled so that you can see them coming up, and it gives you an opportunity as well to share. I'm going to start setting up schedules for all the services that we're live streaming, so that people will be able to see that there's an event coming up, and they'll be able to then participate with us, whether it's through the worship or a Bible class. So like I said, let's come back to it again. Last week we looked at the use of the church's money, and then came into chapter 12. Never really got to that, and that's what we're going to talk about this morning, is look at. So if you want to open up your Bibles in Acts chapter 12, there's a few things I want to talk about when it comes to the overall layout of the book as we have journeyed through this historical document, is that to kind of observe the history of the beginning of the church and all the way through the rest of this book. It's like there's some like phases of the chapters as it progresses, and it starts in Jerusalem and matches the prophecies. When we look at the prophecies of how that it was going to start in Jerusalem from Mount Zion, and it was going to then flow out to all nations. So the first 7 chapters, we see that it really is staying within the Jewish community. It hasn't gone out. I'm not going to say with absolute that no Gentiles, but we have clearly seen in those first chapters the challenge that the church has had with trying to integrate non-Jews into this new Christian discipleship. And so then the next 5 chapters really are going to come around, or really what I call the transitional period, going from more of a pure Jewish Christian church, Jewish Christians converting into Christianity, to now going out to the Gentiles. And that creates a lot of problems, a lot of issues that I think are amazing in the way that they're helpful to us today. Many of the issues that they had are applicable to us in the way that the lessons that we can learn from them, that I think is very powerful. Not only just racism and things like that, but it's also the diversity of people and cultures all the way across this country, all the way across the world. We have churches that are in areas that they're so different from one another that we probably wouldn't recognize them. If you were to take me and I was to travel to an African group of Christians and worship with them, I'd probably be very uncomfortable. I think most of us would. I've gone in the United States and traveled here to churches at times, and they've done things where I've been a little, I can't find anything scriptural wrong. I'm not saying, that I think that they're doing something bizarre against the scripture, but just unique and outside of my comfort zone. And so that's why I think that these chapters now, as we witness the way that Christianity is now moving out into the Gentile world. The last 6 chapters we're going to look at is going to be really focusing on the church in the Gentile world. And then we're going to see another set of problems. It's still going to have the clash between the Judaizing teachers, those that were Christians. Excuse me. I've only had 12 cups of coffee this morning, so I probably need another 12. Let me wet my whistle. Oh, coffee. So when we look at the way that they integrated, but they're integrated in areas that are outside of, the more Jewish region in Judea, where you have predominantly Jews everywhere. Now you're going to places in Greece, Corinth, Macedonia, into Ephesus, Philippi, all of those areas that now are predominantly Gentile, with a few Christians, few Jews have become Christians, and a lot of those came straight out of the synagogues. So, Lacey, I see your test over here on, oh yeah, Facebook. I thought you were trying to test it. So yes, okay, everybody on Facebook, we're good to go. You can fire off. And thank you, Lacey, for testing. I'm not getting them to pop up though on the vMix, but that's okay. We'll work on that.
You'll get there.
Yeah, it's come a long way. I mean, so so yeah, we start to see this progression of this historical document taking us from, and again, matching the prophecies and fulfilling it. That's another thing we need to understand, is that we're not just watching this historical document, but we are going to see some very strong evidence of how it's supporting what was prophesied, 500 years before. As well, one of the other things, and today we're going to get into one of those, is the idea of historical events that were occurring that are supported by worldly documents, secular, as we would say, non-religious documentation of historical events that match in this book of Acts. Remember, I mentioned earlier when we started this class that many historians for years were looking at the book of Acts and did not consider Luke a good historian. They thought they saw all sorts of errors in the way that he had discussed locations and things like this, but now they've all come around and really are classifying him as one of the greater and more accurate historians. And it's interesting because Josephus, one of the great as far as well-known Jewish historians, has a lot of credibility, and we know there's some things that he has said are a little off, and he's got a very unique perspective, and it comes through his motivation behind why he's writing things, versus the purity of Luke in the book of Acts, where he just writes it. And so we're going to see Josephus. I've got some Josephus we're going to look at this morning and read it as we go in. So this is the beginning of, I think, the next level of persecution. And we start out with great popularity, from the day of Pentecost all the way up to Stephen. We have some resistance from the Sanhedrin, but we don't have anyone that was killed until later, years later, when Stephen is finally martyred, and then we find that Christians there start to disperse, but the apostles stay in Jerusalem. But now, as far as going to the next level, we don't see that up to this point. This is the first time now we've moved out of the religious sect or leadership to more of a political government, one that's also identified and recognized by the Roman Empire. So now we're starting to see this acceleration of the persecution, and then in that event, it's a very tragic, and I want us to try to think about those Christians, because sometimes when we go through this, we forget about the impact, the great impact that this would have truly on those Christians that were left there in Jerusalem. So let's go ahead and jump over there. I'm going to bring it up. It's kind of small print, so I'm going to bring up the move over to this one. Get it to work there. There we go. Okay. I got to retrain my fingers. So starting in Acts chapter 12, verse 1. About that time, Herod the king laid violent hands on some who belonged to the church. He killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. And when he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to arrest Peter also. This was during the days of the unleavened bread. And when he had seized him, he put him in prison, delivering him over to 4 squads of soldiers to guard him, intending after the Passover to bring him out to the people. So Peter was kept in prison, but earnest prayer for him was made to God by the church. So Herod is a complex person when we look at him. And this story we're covering this morning, I think, is interesting because the way that this is not only just a beginning of a great persecution that's notched up now, but it also is starting to bring out this conflict between God and government, God and man, and that it's not going to be successful in the greater scheme of things. But a lot of times we don't see the greater scheme of things, do we? A lot of times we're living in the middle of it, and we watch people suffer for the sake of Christ. And when we see this type of violence on James, it had to have a tremendous impact. Does anybody just a little bit of who this James is?
Isn't this Jesus' cousin, the Apostle James?
Say that again? James, his cousin?
I have down that it's the Apostle.
Mm-hmm.
And in a class, someone said it was Jesus' cousin.
I think they are cousins, but I know he's the brother of John. No, you got me on as far as whether he is a cousin or not. I'll admit I'm not sure if you have found that. I guess I overlooked it. I don't know why I did. That does sound familiar. Some of my brain cells aren't firing all the time.
Hop off. But what was the question? What were y'all talking about?
We're talking about James. Who is he? Because I think it's in when we look at, yeah, Eileen says that too. That he's James, the brother of John, and cousin of Jesus. So this isn't just anyone. I mean, this is somebody of great emotional attachment as well as being an apostle. What's different about his death? How did he die?
Wasn't hung like most people. He was killed with a sword.
Yeah. He wasn't stoned, which is,
Stoned, right?
yeah. The sword, it's kind of merciful. I mean, rather than being crucified, which is a Roman method of execution. Well, another one would be if you're a Roman citizen, like what eventually happens to Paul, was he was beheaded. It doesn't say they necessarily beheaded him, but I have a feeling it probably was. But the way that he's executed represents more of the way that Herod, it's not a religious, blasphemous type of thing. And the timing as well is important. Every time we find that all of the spiritual Jews have come and traveled this pilgrimage to Jerusalem for different feast days, you have a great intensity there. Now, this is also showing that Herod really did have a good reputation among Jews. There's a part that, when I was reading on him yesterday, that I always got this idea that most of the Jews really detested him, but they didn't. He actually was known for going and reading from the Torah. He he contributed. He was very cunning in the way that he was able to manage his relationship with the Jews, all the citizens. Not as much, because I think maybe that's why we have a more tainted view of him, is because of the reflection of the religious side of Judaism and the way that he was. And he was very vile. He was a pervert. But when it comes to
For him to kill, he personally killed him. It doesn't say that he told his soldiers to go kill him or go take him out. It says that he killed him.
When I looked at that, Becky, and I couldn't, I was kind of thinking, it says he laid violent hands on and he killed him. Well, a lot of times the credit goes to the person in charge. And that's what I was thinking. I don't know. Does anybody else has any ideas on that?
I would just think that the writing would be he had him killed, not that he killed him. But I can understand what you're saying.
Let me see. Let's look at.
I was always told that you go back to he is who was talked about before.
Yeah, I don't doubt that he would have, but it just, I guess because I've always kind of thought that these guys don't get their hands dirty.
I'm using the New American Standard. Mine says that, verse 1 talks about Herod the king laid hands on some of them. And then in verse 2, it said he had James, the brother of John, put to death with a sword. So this translation makes it seem like he had James killed, but he didn't necessarily do it himself.
And another translation says it's the Basic Bible in English. It's not necessarily all that credible, but it says had him put to death. And I'm flipping between. Oh, it in the NIV says he had James, the brother of John, put to death with a sword. Well, that's one of those nuances, I guess. But because Becky, you're right. When you read this translation, and that's the way mine reads as well, the ESV. But I've always just kind of thought of the idea that, that this guy is lazy. He has people that does that. He's a slob. He's a glutton. Everything about him, I just can't imagine him having the guts to actually do something himself. He wouldn't do anything with Jesus. John, think about, he just. So another interesting thing is something else about the brothers of Zebedee. Anything else?
Are we talking about here in this passage or just in general?
In general. Yeah.
They're called sons of thunder.
Yeah. Why? Why was that? That's a good question, huh?
I don't know.
You remember when they were traveling?
I'd like to know.
They were traveling along, and they were rejected by a Samaritan city, and they weren't permitted to travel through. And they came up to Jesus and said, "Do you want to bring down fire on them? Let's burn this place up." So they got the name brothers of thunder because they were the ones that were asking Jesus about burning up some town, so they got that name. So there's another very important one that happens that with these brothers.
They wanted to be on, well, their mom asked for them to be on Jesus's right and left hand.
Yeah, when we go over to, it's in Matthew 20:21. She comes up to him and he says to her, "What do you want?" She said, "Say that these two sons of mine are to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left, in your kingdom." And Jesus answered, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am to drink?" And they said to him, so they're right there with her, and they said, "We are able." And then he said to them, "You will drink my cup, but to sit at my right hand and at my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared by my Father." James just drank the cup, didn't he? Drank the cup. That's something that I thought just kind of came out when I was looking at James, that it's James. And then the huge impact as well because of, John, his brother, and then to look at the impact it had on the rest of them. So we have a political religious holiday going on, and I say political religious because it's being recognized politically, and Herod is present, and it's possible that the procurator for Rome, we don't have. I don't know if Pilate is still the procurator appointed by Rome to govern this area or not. I don't think he is, but whoever it was probably in touch with everything that was going on the way Pilate was. Pilate would relocate himself to Jerusalem during these great feast days. And it's interesting that we know that after the encounter and all that happened with Jesus and his crucifixion, it's documented that Pilate and Herod became friends. So there's a lot of unrest that can occur that can cause the Romans, if they have any sense of insurrection or trouble, that they're going to go ahead and get in there and quell it. They're going to use, and typically it's fairly violent. So during this time, in the week of the unleavened bread, the Passover, this is when this occurs. And so Herod, he is really thinking that, this is something that is going to please the Jews. So he goes ahead and he's going to carry through with this. So who better than to grab Peter? It's interesting that he didn't get Peter first. That's kind of a side note. But I kind of wondered. One, it wouldn't have had I don't think, it wasn't Peter's time. Peter still had things that he was going to do. So James, unfortunately, was the first apostle that we have documented here that's a martyr. Now look at the way that they have him secured. They have him secured with 4 squads. Usually it's sets of 2 or 3, and they were rotated, so they would stay within eye. They would not just lock him into a dungeon and then a prison cell and walk away. They were always there, present. Now the other thing is, we know very clearly that this isn't like prison guards in our country, where if there's a jailbreak and you're responsible, you might get fired at worst, but you don't get murdered. You don't get executed because somebody had a jailbreak. That's just unheard of in America. Not so for these. Now, where do you think they're secured at? There's a couple of places that they could possibly, I tried to find, and one is in the temple itself. There was an area that they would secure them by the temple guards. Now, Herod had his own men. And remember, Herod was also raised in Rome. He spent some time in Rome and was educated. So there's a lot of things about Herod that he is endorsed and he is a part of, being very Roman. And one of these is the way that he is securing Peter. Shows that he is, using the same type of security around a prisoner, and the way that he deals with the soldiers afterwards as well shows that he's very Roman. And now, so as far as where he's kept, he could have been kept where Herod was at in his palace. He had a location there. He would come in and stay. But he thinks he's helping and showing that the people want to get rid of these Christians. And that's the conflict. Now, God already knows Herod's heart. He already understands that Herod is a lascivious man. He's a glutton. He's arrogant. And he thinks somehow he's going to be able to just kill the plan of God. And it builds up to this. At the same time, it's going to build up the Christians because of what's going on. This is going to give some great hope for their faith. So when this is one that I really enjoy, because I think of Peter and how he must have felt when he was laying in that prison at night. And these were very dark and depressing areas. And one thing I did look up was how were prisoners treated. Now, by Romans, the way that they treated prisoners was, if you were a slave, you would get sold off into slavery or executed. A lot of times, prisoners that received a verdict or were just condemned could remain shackled to a wall, or those prisoners that weren't slaves before could be then sold off into slavery. And some of them just rotted, spent the rest of their lives in these terrible jails. So
they weren't allowed to roam free. They were still, I would say, tethered. Shackled. And I guess naked, because he was told to put his cloak on.
I always thought a cloak was a coat, but when trying to think, because the two.
Well, it says gird yourself, so say gird yourself with a coat.
Well, that's another. Let me look at that when we get there.
This
What
verse 8. New King James.
New King James.
Yeah.
See, the ESV says, let me jump over here. It says, because I've got
And then he said, put on your garment.
Because I've got the Strongs tied in with my
Oh, cool.
New King James. So still by
My New American Standard in verse 6 says the same thing. Well, maybe it's not verse 6. 8. Gird
8.
yourself and put on your sandals. And he said to him, jumping down a little bit, wrap your cloak around you and follow me.
Man, I wouldn't be laying around without my clothes. Not
if they took them from you. I don't think you have a choice.
That would be a really good deterrent, wouldn't it? And humiliation. So I can
Yes.
understand that.
They're not going to give them bathroom breaks. That's kind of what I was thinking too.
I have this thing pulled up talking about, says back in the days of the ancient Near East, both men and women wore flowing tunics. And around the tunic, they'd wear a belt or a girdle. And the tunics were comfortable and breezy, but they would get in the way if they were trying to get away, or if a man was fighting or performing hard labor. So they would gird up their tunic,
That's
and
right.
they would tie it up.
They pulled it up between their legs and made shorts out of it. That's right.
Which would make sense if he was escaping, a prison. He wouldn't want his tunic getting in the way.
Yeah, and that's what gird here in the Strong's, to fasten garments with a girdle or belt. Fasten on one's belt. Gird it. Yeah, to fasten with, to secure tightly to. So to secure your clothes. Because he's going to flee out. So let's go ahead and read this. Now when Herod was about to bring him out, on the very night, Peter was sleeping between two soldiers, bound with two chains. Sentries before the door were guarding the prison. And behold, an angel of the Lord stood next to him, and a light shone in the cell. He struck Peter on the side and woke him, saying, "Get up quickly." And the chains fell off his hands. And the angel said to him, "Dress yourself and put on your sandals." And so he did. And he said to him, "Wrap your cloak around you and follow me." And this is what we were talking about, how he's dressed. So it's dark inside this cell. And that's what I thought was interesting, is this bright light, these two men that are secured to him, plus in that area, to all of a sudden have a bright light shine. But it doesn't seem to even wake Peter. So the soundness of
When it said Herod was about to bring him out, if it was at nighttime, why was Herod going to bring him out, to go kill him?
I think he would probably wait, but it sounds like, in other words, this is the same night that in the morning, because the way that it's saying, that he put him out on that very night, about to bring him out on that very night.
He wasn't going to try him.
He might have. I mean, the bring him out that very night. So during that night, he was going to go ahead and bring him out and execute him. Yeah. So we have somebody joined us called Art of Seeking the Truth. And I know I say she, I don't know. But welcome. And they had seen your comment. They'd commented on the YouTube on a previous lesson, so from this week. So she, I keep saying she, sorry. I don't know.
Well, the little picture, because I'm reading the comments too, it looks like a woman in the picture, but to me, that's what I was thinking too.
Yeah, I'm just kind of looking, and I'm just looking at, I think you're right. That's why I think that's why I'm saying she, because I saw your comment on YouTube, and I looked at it before, but I can't see the icon, and I think that's one of the things that with the vMix, when it pops up, it brings in your avatar. Yeah. She. Thank you. Says thank you. Been watching for a couple of months here and there. Well, awesome. Well, I'm glad. I'm glad and I'm glad you're letting us know you're watching, because it's encouraging. And so Art of Seeking the Truth said, "Cast the garment about thee," in the King James version. So that's a part about this discussion when we talk about how far we get along in class. I've decided, I'm not going to sit and try to ram through. It seems like I do that. That's just because I don't get input necessarily. So you guys are really helping to make this more dynamic, and we can sit here and look and have the resources available to us. So Yeah, this light shining, and then the fact that he had to strike him to wake him up, and then he instructs him, get up quickly. So there's a sense of urgency. He wants to get him out. Maybe.
Hey, Ron.
Yes.
You're muted.
Sorry. What I was saying was, I think there's something to be said for the fact that he was sleeping. I think if I was in prison, I probably would be awake and freaking out, but he's sleeping, and I think that says a lot about his trust in God and in God's plan.
That's exactly what I was going to talk about, Lacey.
That's a very good. That is. Go ahead, Becky.
I just was going to say, I'd be awake like, what's going to happen to me? I don't want my life to end right now. I have too much to do for Jesus.
Well, and another thing is we know his personality, right? I mean, I'll get to you, Eileen. I'm going to mention Eileen's point. He reminds me of the uptight, emotional type. I think he would be one that you would think his personality would be one not to just fall asleep and be able to sleep in those conditions. And especially, that Herod is the one who arrested you. Herod has killed James. So, yeah, I'm just going to sleep here because I'm going to be put to death. And look how soon it is when we talk about the persecutions and knowing how they happen and, how much, they know that they killed the Lord, but the persecution has been building and building. So, yeah, I think that's a very good observation. Is how in the world could you sleep, Peter, unless you had good faith? Eileen says it was after Passover, the night before Herod was to bring him to trial, and that's NIV. So I do tend to believe that he was in the morning, but the way you guys, you brought out, I think, Becky, it was you that said, to bring him out on that very night. Now, when did days change?
Was it at 6 at night?
Yeah, so it could have been that night, would have been the next day, right? So the Passover would go till sundown Saturday. Let me read some of these comments. Eileen says, we think about people in the Bible times having all kinds of robes from pictures. They may not have always worn all these clothes. Peter dressed and put on his cloak and sandals. The art of seeking truth, she says, yeah, good faith and trust in him would help you sleep. I think I just read similar proverbs. Yeah, it really does, I think, show how the comfort that he had in this knowledge of the Lord that, wow, I think we'd all be challenged today. I think there's a lot of Christians that we don't get good sleep with less going on in our lives, right? You would think that the best sleepers in the world would be Christians, that Christians no Christian should have sleep problems, but I'll just shut up because I know that, I'm as well, we all do. But those are some good comments. So the quickness in which he does. So let's go back to that idea of when. I think that's a good thing. I think we're parsing this out, and I think that's good because when it says to bring him out on that very night indicates darkness, and when I was looking here at the Strongs, it just, it just basically is, it doesn't really give us an indication. Bring him in before the, okay. I'm sorry, I just picked up on that on 4. So when he'd arrested him, he put him in prison and delivered him over to 4 squads, back up in 4, intending to bring him before the people after Passover. So it was going to be probably a public execution, we're assuming. I mean, I don't think he was going to bring him out and just parade him around, especially after he'd executed James apparently publicly, and it pleased the people. So now the next person up is going to be Peter. So he's going to wait till after Passover, which would have been Saturday evening. So it would be consistent with the idea of it being that night, on that night. Yeah, okay. So, wrap your cloak and follow me. Let's go ahead and move on to this great escape as he comes through this. I don't know why these. Having a little problem with this, trying to get it to switch for me. And when he went out, he followed him. And he did not know what was being done by the angel was real, but though he was seeing a vision. When they had passed the first and second guard, they came to an iron gate leading into the city. It opened for them of its own accord. And when they had went out and went along the street, and immediately the angel left him. And when Peter came to himself, he said, "Now I am sure that the Lord has sent his angel to rescue me." So Peter was, sleeping, and then all of a sudden this bright light, everything about it is surreal. And so I can see where everything that is going on once you come out of a deep sleep or sleeping period, that you're not aware that, is this really a dream or such? I remember one time in the Army, we were on maneuvers and we'd been going so long and I'd had so little sleep. But when I finally did, I was only been asleep for a couple hours, and they came and woke me up, and I looked around and I didn't know if I was dreaming or not. And I had to ask them, whoever was talking to me, I had to ask them, where are we? What's going on? And, so that's a little different, but I could understand everything about it. The bright light, these guards, his chains are off, the gate's open, and the angel says, "Follow me." And that to me is so amazing, that everybody, and this is the way that the faithful are rewarded, is the way that they see this type of event. A lot of times I think in the simpler ways of our lives that we don't notice wonderful things that are happening around us. Maybe it's not a prison break, we're not being set free out of a prison, but I just keep using this for my own description of my faith, and I unfortunately seem to live with a faith of a rearview mirror. It's real clear in the rearview mirror, but when I'm living in it right now and here, a lot of times I don't seem to understand and grasp the greatness of what God is doing for me.
Well, in my prayer this morning, when I was talking to God, I said, "Dear Heavenly Father, I pray that others will see that you are working in their life, even in their troubles. And it may take a day, a month, a year, 2 years, 5 years. I just hope that those that are losing their faith by not worshiping God will take a stand back and look and see. It may take God a while for his hand to make things work. Like for a new job, well, he's got to clear that, and he's got to let you see the ad in the paper or talk to somebody, or that was my prayer this morning.
I think people need prayers like that. I think we all need somebody praying for us, because there's a lot of times that we become overwhelmed with this real dimension in which we exist in, and we understand, we may have knowledge, which is where our faith is based from, but there's still the struggle of everything that's flying in my face, the here and now, the reality of what's happening with me. And then we have to try to bring out continually these ideas of, wait a minute, like the Art of Seeking the Truth said, there's similar proverbs, the psalmists and different things that Jesus has said that we can then pull out and help reinforce us. But I think that should be a prayer we should all try to remember for those who are struggling in their faith. Because we all struggle in our faith at different times. And it's dangerous, because those are the times where I think that Satan really takes advantage of us in trying to really pull us away from him. Now, I love the way that it says rescued, the way Peter had this realization. When he's finally out in the street and he's by himself, and you can imagine the darkness. They didn't have street lights, didn't have flashlights, so whatever light that he had. Now, one thing that I did, if I recall, yes, that the Passovers would coincide with the full moon. It was a part of it. So there may have been some light, but normally people weren't around there. People, they were asleep. They were in their homes and stuff. So him being out on the street alone, the Art of Seeking the Truth says, I think this is the Art of Seeking the Truth. She comments, I thank him that he has patience after all the time he has reminded us. LOL. So true.
Hey, Ron, going back to something you said, well, Becky said, she's praying that people who are losing faith will see God working. And you said that, we need to be praying for each other. And going back to verse 5, the church was praying fervently together for Peter and this situation. And then we're going to see here in a minute that they're still together praying for him. And I think that just goes along well with what you said about us praying for each other.
I think it's neat that you basically, it just dawned on me, you have two groups of Jews that are gathering. You have some that are gathering for Herod to watch this man of God executed, and you have these Christians that gathered together that are praying. And who won? Who won? That's what is really kind of awesome about it, is the fact that they didn't. But you're right. I mean, they've come together, which means it's nighttime. I think it's the beginning of the next day for them. It's the first day of the week because of the Sabbath, the way that it's sundown. Yeah. But the idea that he now acknowledges, I am sure the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from the hand of Herod, and he says, from all that the Jewish people were expecting. That's what they wanted. And especially Peter. I mean, it was, Peter and John that twice embarrassed the council. So, yeah, I can definitely understand. So now after he's set free, where does he head? He heads right to
where they're praying.
Yep, where they're praying. So after he'd realized that, this is what we had just looked at, that he had been set free and that it was an angel, then he realized this. He went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose other name was Mark, and there were many gathered together and were praying. And when he knocked at the door of the gateway, a servant girl named Rhonda came to answer. Recognizing Peter's voice, in her joy, she did not open the gate, but ran and reported that Peter was standing at the gate. And they said to her, "You're out of your mind." What have you been praying for? They're so focused, on the prayer, and the answer is at the door. How many times have we missed that, right?
So I'm saying sometimes we don't really see that God is working in our life, and it's like He's answered your prayer. Do you not see it?
I can appreciate that. I mean, think about where Peter's at. They know, right? They know where he's at. I mean, how in the world is he going to get out of there? Is Peter some sort of Navy SEAL? He's a fisherman. How many people, I thought about this too, is how many people do you think ever really escaped?
Zero.
No.
And I don't think they even tried because they knew they would be killed. So at least down there, they would be a little bit fed, but alive.
I think that, and just imagine the motivation of those who were in charge of keeping him in custody. You think
their life was on the line.
Yeah, you think I'm going to lose my life over you? Man, I will fight you. I will do what I have to do to keep you in this prison. And he said he put...
And in verse... Sorry.
No.
I was going to say in verse 15, a little later on, they kept saying, "It is his angel." So it makes me think that they figured Herod had already killed him at that point. Possibly, is what they were thinking.
Well, I think they knew that this assembly was happening. And I think that, I'm glad we kind of looked at that closer, was how close Peter was to being let out to this group that was going to then, Herod was going to make him, a show and have him executed. And I'm sure that those Christians there were aware of the process, that was fixing to happen. And that's probably why they gathered immediately. That's what I think. I think that what you find is, when Passover was done, it's dark, so it's at night, and Herod now is setting up the stage to go ahead and bring him out. And so everybody's coming together for Herod's execution, and then Peter is released. Well, when that is all going on, that everybody's gathering for his execution, you have almost like a death watch where the Christians are coming together and praying fervently. So, and I think that fits in with what you're saying, Lacey, about, that they think, well, he's gone to join James. He's gone the way of James. And so whoever's at that door, how could it be him? But why would an angel need to knock at the door? I don't know. I'm just picking on him now, but I just think, an angel standing there knocking at the door just appeared before him like Jesus did, come in there. So they look at her and they think that she somehow has lost her mind. And so let's go on. But she kept insisting it was so. And they kept saying, "It's his angel." But Peter continued knocking. And when they opened, they saw him and were amazed. But motioning to them with his hand to be silent, he described to them how the Lord had brought him out of prison. So there's a lot of discussion, isn't there? There's a lot of it wasn't, he had to tell them, calm down, calm down, and tell them, okay. But I think it also recognizes the idea that they believe in angels, right? I think that's something else that they this is one of verses I've used before and looking at the cultural belief that they believed in angels. Keep glancing over, making sure we don't have any new comments so I can include them in our discussion. So, why? Okay, Artist Seeking the Truth says, angel as in spirit or as his guardian. I believe an angel as his spirit, from my looking at this. That somehow maybe they did. I don't know. If I'm trying to think of specifically, did the Jews of that day believe in a guardian angel? I know they believed in angels, so you may, if somebody knows. I think the guardian angel kind of thing is developed later in Christianity, but I'll be honest, I don't know of that. That's a good question. I've just believed in that they since she was proclaiming that it was Peter, and they then associated saying it's his angel. But you're right, that could infer that it's his guardian angel. That's what I said about this class. I'm not going to ever claim that, I know everything, and I think somebody to sit and try to proclaim that. I mean, I'm not a Greek scholar, and there's a lot of theologians out there that even they contradict themselves. They argue among themselves sometimes on the commentaries as I look at them.
And Ron, I think that there was, like you said, culturally, there were things that they may have believed in that we're not familiar with. And I think back to back in the Gospels where Jesus is walking on the water and the disciples don't recognize him. They think it's a ghost. So there just could be, some cultural beliefs that they had that maybe are a little confusing to us, but would have made sense to them.
I think there's a lot of stuff like that where we just don't click to the culture and how it fits and we talk about the context. We do know they believed in angels, but so Artist Seeking the Truth said, yeah, not sure either about guardians. Just weird that after passing they think angel and not resting. I'm not sure what you mean by that, not resting. Yeah, that's a good one. I'm gonna see. I'm not sure. I like I said, my understanding is that the idea of guardian angels comes from the Hebrews in the first couple chapters when it talks about how when he's talking about the superiority of Jesus, and then he mentions the idea that are not angels ministering spirits to the saints first sleep. I'm still not sure what you mean by that. I'm sorry. First sleep, resting. Is that?
I think maybe what she means is, in the Bible, when people pass away, like at Thessalonians, it's the reference to being asleep. Maybe that's what she's referring to.
I think, okay. Kind of like with Lazarus, the rich man Lazarus, where he was in a state. Is that what we're thinking?
I'm thinking just like on the resurrection, it says, and those who are asleep.
First.
Right.
Yeah. I tend to lean towards an angel, either in representation of Peter, because they're it's hard to say. I'm actually kind of debating myself, because I was thinking that as far as like resurrection, when it comes to their understanding, they knew there was a resurrection. They were being taught by the gospel. Culturally, as far as before they became a Christian, their perspective of death was one split. We know that the Sadducees, one sect, did not believe in the resurrection, and the Pharisees, they did. So there was culturally, as far as what happened to the spirit after it was, departed the body, we know that for 3 days there was a lot of them believed that the body still possessed the spirit, and hence the resurrection or the raising of Lazarus beyond 3 days when Jesus did that was to help support the concept that, defeat that cultural thought that somehow the spirit would linger in the body. That's why I lean towards believing that more, that they either believed it was angel, as in he was representing his spirit spiritually, that somehow.
And Jesus visited them before he went up to heaven. He visited them in a spirit-like form. So maybe they had that on their mind too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
after he was buried and resurrected.
That's a good point. I mean, what would be your reference point to thinking that? I mean, you have either some preconceived ideas or you have some evidences. They had evidences. They had somebody who had appeared to them before, right? Yeah. So, art seeking the truth. LOL, it's okay. I thought once you're sleeping, first death, you are resting till resurrection, but that makes sense too. Oh, I agree with you. I think that art seeking the truth. I agree that first death. I just never really heard it in that way, but I like that. I mean, I'm sleeping the first death. I think we got that, Lacey. I think that was a good because that's what it is described. We fall asleep. But I just kind of think that their reference, and why would they come to the conclusion of that this was Peter's spirit at the door, or an angel of Peter, right? Yeah. But the whole idea also is the shock effect here, isn't it? That somehow he was able to be out there knocking on the door was something startling to them. And the other idea is that just think about how wonderful this was, that their prayer was answered. That to me is another one where they sometimes, we pray, but I don't know that we really have a realistic expectation of it happening. Right? I mean, I've prayed for a lot of people that were dying and they died. And, so there's a lot of times when, people will ask for me to pray for them and, they're terminal. There's a part where I'll pray for them, don't get me wrong, but there's a deep level that I'm going, I don't think it's going to happen. So I appreciate the idea of them sitting there praying fervently, please, Lord, let him be saved, get him out of there. And then he's banging on the door and they're like, they don't have it. But what a wonderful, I can see them grabbing Peter and having all that excitement too, huh? It just would be overwhelming to imagine what they were going through. So now he tells them to do what?
Go tell these things to James and to the brethren.
So
and then he
go ahead.
And then he left. He departed the Christians.
He didn't stick around, did he?
I think he knew they were be coming after him. The soldiers were going to be coming. And Herod was saying, go find him.
I thought the same thing. I kind of felt bad about thinking that way, but I kind of thought the same thing was that Peter's on the run. He's like, I'm not sticking around. Well, there's another part that it would have brought more trouble to them, possibly, if they would have come searching him out. They might have been able to know that that's where he would be. There's no shame in that either. It's not like the Lord said, okay, you better stick around. Don't cower out and run. It doesn't say we can't protect ourselves. Don't go out and purposefully go out and flaunt it. Go out and just stand there in front of the crowd and going, hey, you guys looking for Peter to execute him? Look, I'm over here behind you. It's always purposeful. It's always purposeful. You know, when they were arrested in the temple, remember when they were held over before the council, one of the things that happened was when they were freed. So this isn't the first time as well, right? That an angel has released him. He's been set free. And they were told, though, to do what? Go back and teach. Go back and teach. So when he's set free here, he's going and demonstrating to them that your prayers are answered. And then he departs. You know, he can just
continue on. And you're right, Ron. Go and teach. And then this is proof that God answers prayers.
He brought the answer, didn't he?
Because you didn't ask amiss.
And that's what I see here is that I think Peter had a location he was going to head to. And he just swung by. And him coming by was, hey, your prayers are answered. Tell James and the brethren. And he left. And so I don't know what necessarily, I hate to use the word inspired, if it was necessarily guided, but I think he was acutely aware that there were a lot of other people that cared about him and were very concerned about him. But he departs. Now we shift over. Now, what's the consequences of this escape? What is the consequences that they're going to have to deal with? And so in starting 18, now when the day came, there was no little disturbance among the soldiers over what had become of Peter. And after Herod searched for him and did not find him, he examined the sentries and ordered that they should be put to death. Then he went down to from Judea to Caesarea, and he spent time there. So this is where we're talking about, again, the accountability. So he searched. He was looking for Peter. And so that was probably good for Peter to leave and get out of there. And I'm sure there were a lot of people that would rat him out and tell, that knowing where these Christians are gathering too. But when he couldn't find them, the next point was he's not going to accept this as miraculous. I mean, can you imagine the poor guards trying to explain that? We don't know. When you guys came to get him, he was gone. Just gone. What? What do you mean? You notice the security that was there? 2 gates, chained, 2 men there with him. If I was Herod, I wouldn't believe it. I could not accept the fact that he just poof. It would seem like it would have to be an inside job. But this was very customary. And very customary when he went down, to go ahead and execute those poor guys. Aline says, I love the priestly prayer, number 624, when praying for suffering. Let's reference that. Oh, my fat fingers on my little tablet. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you.
I love this too. I actually pray this for my kids. About my kids, or whatever you want to say.
Yeah, he's the only one that can truly do this. We rely on a lot of external things in our lives, and but there's so much more that is really out of our control, and that we have to put our faith with the Lord. So thank you, Eileen, for sharing that. So let's go on now, and let's get to the other end of the bookshelf of this episode that's going on. And I think it's a very valuable lesson. Not only that, but it's historical documentation of Herod's death. It's documented in other areas, not inside just inside the Bible. But I think it helps to bring to a conclusion of this persecution that has begun, and that somehow, that they're going to win this. And Herod, remember, he made a mockery of Jesus in trying to, in that night, so let's start over in verse 20. Now Herod was angry with the people of Tyre and Sidon, and they came to him with one accord, and having persuaded Blastus, the king chamberlain, they asked for peace, because their country depended on the king's country for food. On an appointed day, he put on royal robes, took his seat upon the throne, and delivered, I'm going to continue on, he delivered an oration to them. And the people were shouting, "The voice of God and not of a man." Immediately the angel of the Lord struck him down, because he did not give God the glory, and he was eaten by worms and breathed his last. But the word of God increased and multiplied. See how this is bookshelfed? It starts out with the idea of Herod during the Passover starts persecution, thinking that he's going to be able to please the Jews and stop this as well. I don't think he even cared. I think he just wanted to please the Jews. And then in another crowd, trying to please the Jews, or they're trying to please him, you see? And God takes him out. And the idea again in verse 24 that the word of God increased and multiplied did nothing to stop God's word. You're not going to stop it. No one is. I don't care how corrupt a society is. You're not going to stop God's word from coming back to him. As the prophet said, that his word will not go out and come back void of him. It's interesting. Let me find where I got this here. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to go ahead and wrap up. Read 25, and then we're going to look at Josephus's. And then, so at the end of the chapter, we see where, and then Barnabas and Saul returned from Jerusalem, and when they had completed their service, bringing with them John, whose other name was Mark. So while this is happening, what we find is where we had left off in chapter 11, the end of 11, where they had gathered together, a collection, and then Paul and Barnabas traveled down to Jerusalem. All of this is occurring. We don't have any indication of what they were doing or interacting with this, but then it says, and then we find that after the thing with Herod, he dies, then we see Barnabas and Saul going back to Jerusalem, and they bring John Mark with them, which is, he's going to come up again in the conversation. But coming to the idea of this historical document being Josephus, and as far as being documented in his book Antiquities of the Jews, chapter 19, and then chapter 8, section 2, where he talks about from a different perspective. And I want to read it because I thought it was interesting. Some people have tried to say there was a contradiction in the way he says, but it doesn't. But it just gives. Now you can, when you listen to this, you'll see Josephus's perspective and his prejudice. That's the word I was grasping for there, was his prejudice there. So let's just read through it. It's a little long. Now when Agrippa had reigned 3 years over all Judea, he came to the city Caesarea, which was formerly called Stratos Tower. And there he exhibited shows in honor of Caesar, upon his being informed that there was a certain festival celebrated to make vows for his safety, at which festival a great multitude was gotten together of principal persons, and such as were of dignity throughout his providence. On the second day of which shows, he put on a garment made of silver, and of a contexture truly wonderful. And he came into the theater early in the morning, at which time the silver of his garment, being illuminated by the fresh reflection of the sun's rays upon it, shone out after a surprising manner, and it was so resplendent as to spread a horror over those who looked intently upon him. And presently his flatteries cried out, one from one place, and another from another, and another from another, though not for his good, that he was a god. And they added, Be thou merciful to us, for although we hitherto reverenced thee only as a man, yet shalt thou henceforth own thee as superior to mortal nature. Upon this the king did neither rebuke them nor reject their impious flattery. But as he presently awkwardly looked up, he saw an owl sitting on a certain rope over his head, and immediately understood that this bird was a messenger of ill tidings, as it had once been the messenger of good tidings to him, and fell into the deepest sorrow. A severe pain also arose in his belly, and began in the most violent manner. And when he had been quite worn out by the pain in his belly for 5 days, he departed his life. I just thought that was interesting, the way that Josephus references it. You can see there's not a contradiction. It's an external historical document of this event in Caesarea. And it kind of, I think, adds to it. It gives an interesting perspective if you think of his arrogance and wanting to project himself in the way that people would look up to him. And so he puts on this amazing, according to Josephus, garment of silver that's going to reflect the sun. And the way he described it, I thought it was interesting, their horror. I think probably was terror or fright, that when they saw that, it was like this glow of his clothes and stuff. But he was more of a fan of Herod than what sometimes we imagine. And he's not the only one that looked up to him. There's other historical writers, Jewish writers, who also look up to him and refer to Herod as being really somebody that was a pretty good guy. But even Josephus says, he walked the line, and he didn't, instead of rebuking him like a Jew, a Jew that was spiritual would have said, no, you can't do this. And so he was struck down. Now, this death, how he died, Josephus doesn't say, except he does concur with Luke's account, is that it was a belly. It was something sudden that came upon him, as well as it seems Josephus seems to bring out that people around him, as this occurred, witnessed that he became very distressed, and it was a rapid onset in front of everyone else. So I thought that was interesting as far as how long, but it wasn't an instant death. It was agonizing. The way that I was looking at the way that Luke records. So Luke is a physician. So his description is going to be more of a medical description versus somebody that's just watching it happening. So many have said when they read this, and it says he was eaten by worms and died, that this is some sort of rot that then became gangus with gangrene. And so these worms are basically maggots, that were eating on the dead flesh there. Artist Seeking the Truth says, sounds similar to Nimrod and his Don Tammuz and how they were worshipped. It's like the story keeps popping up. Yeah, the same. You're referring to a thing where Nimrod had basically did the same thing. Don Tammuz. I think I'm not saying that right. I think that it really kind of also Herod epitomizes the idea of power and absolute power. And the idea of how easy it is to corrupt and make yourself. And we see that even today, don't we? We see that with leaders today, that how they start out maybe humble, but eventually, unfortunately, not all of them, but most of them end up allowing this power to inflate their ego.
Well, the one thing I was thinking of, Ron, is the world hasn't changed. Herod was saying, how can I appear fabulous? And it's always the outer, not the inner. They're not looking at the inner heart. They're looking at the outer, and the more exorbitant and grandiose, and that's people today. Oh, isn't that person beautiful? Just because they fixed their hair, got these long fingernails painted or whatever. It's not the heart.
You know what it reminds me of? This whole setup of him going out there reminds me of a political setting where, like at the different political conventions, everything. I'll never forget the night Obama was elected president in Chicago. Do you guys remember watching that? It was amazing. I mean, everything, though, you could tell was choreographed for impact. And it happens and I'm saying it, I'm not trying to say this because of political, one way or the other. Everyone does it. The lighting, it's staged, choreographed. Nothing's by accident. Everything is perfect. For what reason? For the impact, to try to project an emotion of whatever they want, whether it's power, humility. I mean, they take emotions and shape the stage to project that with the message of whoever that person may be. Rock stars do that. ZZ Top, I remember they had a coupe, a little coupe race, a little car that they would do. You set the stage for that, and that's what I think of with Herod doing the same thing. And yet, you're right, Becky. It happens all the time, even today, huh? Well, any closing comments or thoughts? This was a wonderful class, man. A lot of good interaction, and I want to look at the guardian angel idea on whether they believed in that or not. So,
oh, everybody left. I got distracted and I came back and everyone was gone. Or Becky's gone.
Yeah. Well, if you're I'm going to go ahead and sign us off. If you want to hang around, Lacey, we can chat for a little bit. But everybody on live, I appreciate you joining us, taking the effort and the involvement. Aline and the Art of Seeking the Truth, thank you for joining us. I hope that you'll join us again next Friday. And if you've got some comments, drop them into the YouTube comments there on this, and I'll read them and try to reiterate them again next week. So thank you guys very much.